Welcome to CHTV, everyone, and the road to the 2026 NFL Draft. With you, your host, Newt Westen. Today, we are going to have our final episode in our All-Star Game preview series, taking a look today at the Senior Bowl. And with that, we are going to be breaking down the offensive positions for this, looking at guys that either are going to be high and worth noting their name because they are going to be fun players that are going to put on a highlight reel there, or guys that might be falling to the Packers when we get into times of need. I know especially looking at running back and quarterback are not pressing needs, but they are positions that absolutely could be addressed in the draft, depending on how free agency shakes out, amongst a handful of other things. So with that, let's go ahead and get into the quarterbacks, running backs, and tight ends that are going to be in this year's draft class. With the quarterback class, I think the highlight here from a college lens is going to be Diego Pavia, who was the Heisman runner-up, All-American, and really put on an absolute highlight year. The issue with Pavia is going to be his play style and his size really does not project to be a true NFL starting quarterback. And him, as well as all of these players that you can see listed there, Taylon Green, Sawyer Robertson, Luke Altmyer, and Cole Payton. Really, I do see those guys as more so your group of potential backup players, guys that, depending on how they pan out, could be long-term guys in the NFL. I look at a Cole Payton out of North Dakota State with just 1 year of starting experience, really was able to light the world on fire in the FCS realm with his ability to be a dual threat player. I think he's going to be a fun player. I think he'll be a day 3 option that intrigues some teams in terms of maybe what he can give you as a little bit of an alternate style quarterback. I think that Sawyer Robertson and Altmyer of this group beyond Payton probably stand out to me as potential backup quarterback, developmental quarterback targets that you could see going off the board in that 6th or 7th round slot. Not necessarily a super sexy pick as you're talking about a potential career backup, but definitely, as we've seen this year with Malik Willis and the need over the last decade of a backup quarterback to really be able to come in and be a presence. So any of those guys, I could absolutely see the Packers pulling the trigger on late in the draft, especially with 3 7th-round picks, 2 of them being 250 plus. Definitely could be an option there. When you get to the tight ends, I think the conversation does come back around in that later lens. Obviously, Tucker Kraft playing at the level that he has been really an all-pro type player, cut short this year due to the injury. Musgrave is, he's kind of hot and cold. Obviously, as a blocker, not going to be the guy that's going to really be out there threatening. Maybe the Packers look to pair Kraft with a little bit more of a traditional inline guy. When you take a look at this list here, Justin Jolly is going to pop out as probably the best tight end of the group that is at the Senior Bowl. I think he's going to end up being a top 100 guy. A couple of the guys, Roush and Gillenberg, are going to be up there, probably day 3 guys in my opinion, and as well as Tanner Koisel, who I really liked at Ball State, and I think he did a really good job of playing at a high level when you put him at Houston this year, over 70 catches and 700 yards in that system. He's going to be more of your big slot type player, but he is a fun player to have out there. And depending on where he falls, I think he could be an absolute steal on day 3. And then we jump over to the running backs for the Senior Bowl. I think the running back class as a whole is definitely down this year when you compare it to last year and some of the other years in recent history. But last year especially, you're kind of seeing that dip, maybe back to normal, maybe a little bit lower. But when you get guys in there that are probably top 5 backs in this year's class, it does help to kind of bolster what you were going to see from the backs at the Senior Bowl. And with that, I'm talking about Jonah Coleman specifically. I think that he's going to end up being a top 5 back, running back out of Washington. Washington, kind of human bowling ball. When you look at him, he is going to run through a guy rather than run around them. He has a very violent style of running, very aggressive. And there are shades of his game where you kind of see a really old school tailback that's just going to put their shoulder down and try to run right through your helmet. I think also with the down year that Penn State had, did not do Nick Singleton any favors. He's still probably going to be a top 10 back and maybe flirting with that top 5 range. But Katron Allen, Fat Man himself, has really grabbed my attention, and as I've looked at him from summer scouting now to this point, has been honestly a steady riser for me. So a player that I think is going to be a fun guy in this class that has an opportunity to be a day 2 guy, as well as Jonah Coleman, potentially potentially Nick Singleton. I think all 3 of those guys you could hear within the top 100. And then other guys as well, Mike Washington Jr., Jam Miller, Le'Veon Moss are all going to be day 3 guys that I think could be a really fun option when you start taking a look at what the Packers need. You have obviously a ticking clock with Josh Jacobs. Running backs do not last forever, unfortunately. Marshawn Lloyd really has kind of been a disappointment when you talk about a 3rd round pick, someone that you thought was going to be able to come in and be an option. And then Wilson and the other stable that we have are decent 2nd and 3rd options, but you may honestly look to get a guy in that you can get under the wing of a Pro Bowler like Josh Jacobs, have them start to learn some of the scheme-specific things for the Packers offense, get a running back coach that can coach them up on blocking, which is one of the bigger things that you see as a skill gap between college football and the NFL, and let them develop. I honestly think that could be a really great opportunity if the right guy were to fall for the Packers there. But those 6 guys, I think, are going to be names to keep an eye out for. Once again, Singleton, Allen, and Coleman is some of your top guys in the group, but then Washington, Miller, and Moss as kind of that maybe 2nd or 3rd tier as you start looking at potential day 3 targets. And then looking at the wide receiver group, that's where we have a good amount of players with the group itself. KC Concepcion is going to lead probably the group as the high target name. I definitely think he could be a 1st round draft pick, a guy that has taken the most of his time, made the most of his transfer to Texas A&M from NC State, I believe. I hope I said that right. But he has been a phenomenal player this year, Paul Hornig Award winner and a All-American, well-deserved. Jacoby Lane, Malachi Fields are going to be other names, Elijah Surratt as well, where you start to look at guys that could absolutely be a player that is going to hear their name called within that top 100. Fields being that kind of big body player as well as Lane. Both of them are going to come in about 6'4", give or take an inch. And they're going to be kind of that big target receiver. I think that's something where if you take a look at the Packers room, could be a position where you start to maybe look at getting a bigger target with the likes of Reed, Golden, and Watson. You don't really have that true big presence within that wide receiver group as a top target. Now, I don't think you'll see a wide receiver come off with the Packers' top 2 picks, but depending on where some of those guys might start to fall, you could see them come off with a day 3 pick. But then there are some other guys on here as well that are going to be really fun players. I think Ted Hurst out of Georgia State has been a guy that's made the most of his senior year there. Baron Brown has had his name kind of kicked around a little bit. So I think that ultimately it's a decent group when you look at it. The 3 guys that I mentioned at the top with Concepcion especially, but then Surratt and Fields and Lane too are going to probably be top 15 guys, maybe top 20 But you're looking at a really big chunk of the players we're more likely than not going to get a chance to see, just because of the youth at the position, a lot of juniors coming out, as well as just players opting to not attend. But with that, that's going to be kind of the hit for the wide receiver group. And then we move to what is probably, of all of the offensive positions, the biggest need for the Green Bay Packers, and that is going to be the offensive line. Now, center, I would say, amongst conversations with other fans, taking a look at the roster and the, I don't want to say imminent, but likelihood of Jenkins not being signed, him being a cap casualty, not signed, but retained, him being a cap casualty. You start to look at, like I said, what that center position could look like. On this list, centers would include Parker Brailsford, um, Jake Slaughter. Whew, man. And that is going to be it. Now, there's a handful of guys on here that you might see sliding in to that center role. You absolutely could see like a Trey Zune, who played tackle for Texas A&M, sliding in there. Gennings Dunker as well, right tackle for Iowa, being an option when you have a player like that starting to kind of move inside. So a couple guys that could be at the Senior Bowl that could be center options. Like I said, Brailsford and Slaughter being the two guys that were true centers at the collegiate level. Connor Lew not being here, him being a little bit, being an underclassman and coming off the injury as well, would probably be my top guy. I haven't done all of them again. Logan Jones, who I can't remember if he was at the Shrine Bowl, but I would love to see him at an All-Star event. And then, like I said, it does thin out pretty quick there. Probably Pat Coogan would be another name, but couple guys that you can kind of look at for true centers, and then possible guys to move into center. Beyond that, we do have a handful of guys that are going to be, in my opinion, pretty decent tackles. Isaiah World will probably be a top 100 pick when it's all said and done. Take a look at Max Ian Acher. I might have said that wrong. I apologize. As another player out of Arizona State. And then a guy that I really like, Jude Bowery. Right now, I believe that, let me just double check with where he's at. I think he's a kind of consensus day 3 player. Probably that, I would say somewhere around pick 150. And once again, it's a consensus board, doesn't necessarily mean anything. Oh, no, 105 is what mock draft database has him at right now. I really do like Jude Bowery. I think he's got a chance to be a day 2 pick. He moves so well, and he's done such a good job as a blindside tackle at Boston College. His hands are just atrocious, but that is something that you can absolutely fix with some good coaching. Now, do NFL teams think they can fix them is going to be another conversation when you start looking at the guys that really have the understanding for something that can and cannot be. I think just what I've seen, if you can get him into a system and have him develop an understanding for that technical side, he could be a really fun player. Austin Barber out of Florida is another guy that I think I'm a little bit higher on than others in terms of where he could end up possibly as a D2 guy, more so in that back half of day 2. And then I think probably the biggest guard that you would see out of this group would be Emmanuel Pregnon. He's getting a lot of love for a potential early day 2 type selection. I haven't looked at him. I know I didn't really like him all that much last year, but I definitely have to look at him again this year after he transferred from USC to Oregon. So he's going to be a player that I think is going to be, as far as the interior guys and probably a true guard, some of that is going to be a little bit higher as well. Kean Rutledge, another player out of Georgia Tech that you could see. Gennings Dunker, I already mentioned, with a possible slide into center, but I think likely you're going to see him moving into one of the interior positions. Same thing with Trey Zune, previously mentioned. So that's going to kind of hit it for the offensive linemen and the offensive players at the Senior Bowl. With that, that does kick off next week. Shrine Bowl practice actually starts this weekend. So if you guys are watching this when it comes out or a couple days after, definitely start to kind of prepare yourself in terms of clips that are going to start to fly all over social media from the one-on-ones that you're going to see. It's going to be a lot of fun. You're going to see guys flying up people's boards from one clip that just caused them to go crazy. I'm always obviously super hesitant of that. I think some of the things that are going to be really nice are just to get some small school guys against solid competition and give them a chance to really showcase what they can do. I think of like a Quinyon Mitchell coming from Toledo and making the most of his time at the Senior Bowl as a really good example of what, in my opinion, you want to look for out there. Mike Green out of Marshall being another example. He had some film last year that set the world on fire. I'm forgetting who he went up against. I want to say it was one of the tackles from Oregon, but just an absolute rocket ship in terms of the views and the conversations on social media surrounding those players as they made their debut at the Senior Bowl. So keep an eye out for that. Keep an eye out for a lot of those things, as really this is the start of the NFL draft season with this all-star circuit starting to kick off. But that's going to wrap it up for this episode. As always, please like, comment, subscribe to Cheesehead TV to follow along with everything Packers and their draft. We will see you guys next time.